Good morning and welcome to your Saturday morning show on TVC News Nigeria, the platform. My name is Sam Omashe. Nigeria's 2017 budget is still awaiting the president's assent. From lawmaking to singing, one popular senator has penned a book. And Lagos is working as residents of Ajah and Abule Egba get overhead bridges. It promises to be an interesting time on the program today, but let's begin with an excerpt from my article published in the Nation newspaper entitled At the IBB Wedding. It was not the array of private jets that bothers me as much as the fact that they gathered for the GAP 2001. The one who dissolved June 12, suspended civil liberties, hounded critics, scuttled the economy, invented the fleeing Andrews, exploded talents, obliterated the word corruption from official use, and boasted, after all, that he was the evil genius. When the political and business elite gathered to pay homage to him at the wedding of his child, was it an endorsement of those woes that blighted a chapter of our past? I find it difficult to believe that. Some of the guests were also his victims. It has to be that he was forgiven. IBB must be the luckiest man to have committed that much atrocity and enjoyed forgiveness without asking for it. The question is he grateful or appreciative of this, or is it a wasted act of grace? The weekend in Mina also reinforces what I have noticed about society weddings. The parents show off. In such weddings, it is about the parents, and in poor weddings, it is about the couple.
The dust raised by the delay in passage and eventual passage of the 2017 budget is yet to settle. A week after the budget was passed by the National Assembly, it is yet to get the president's assent. Could it be that the absence of President Buhari will stall the signing of the 2017 appropriation bill into law? Minister of Information Lai Mohammed is now frantically trying to debunk media reports he calls mischievous and absolute rubbish that have falsely attributed the statement to him about the budget signing. The acting president's spokesman Laolu Akonde also put out a tweet to set the record straight. Laolu Akonde says Professor Yemi Osinbajo will assent the budget when he is satisfied with the content. But there is more. Some key government agencies have refused to submit their budget proposals to the National Assembly in line with the extant laws for consideration and approval. 38 statutory corporations whose annual budget run into trillions of naira are spending without appropriation.
It's not only an infraction of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007, it is also an affront to our Constitution, which we also want to uphold. Our President, General Muhammad Buhari, in 2016 sent to this National Assembly the appropriation act for that year together with those estimates. So at a loss, why in 2017 the ministers found it impossible to accompany the same appropriation act of 2017 with those estimates of the agencies under them.
We need to take stringent steps and compel these parastatals, give them ultimatum from now to submit all their budgets so that the National Assembly will look into them and pass it for them. Otherwise, we will take it as gross misconduct.
That all agencies and parastatals should stop further capital expenditure in the current year until they comply with the Fiscal Responsibility Act and the Constitution. Those in favor of this additional prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. And I cannot see how we can continue in a society where we are fighting corruption, where people will be spending money without approval, without appropriation. It must stop. It will stop, and it's going to stop from now. Clearly, we have made a position that based on this amendment, this motion, they must get the budget into us in 2 weeks.
How do you even sign a budget when the budget is not complete? That's one good question. Why would you send anything to the Senate or the National Assembly for assent when key parastatals are not there, like the CBN? What is going on? And then to add another fire into the house that is already burning, what is happening? They are saying that the president will be the one to assent the budget. That's Muhammadu Buhari, not the acting president, Yemi Osinbajo. How does that happen? Are they going to carry all the budget and fly it first class to London for Buhari to sign? That is an affront to the Constitution. Was that what he meant by coordinating the affairs of states? Is the English coming home to roost now? Is that what is going on? We need to know, because it is grossly irresponsible for anyone to say that Muhammadu Buhari should sign the budget when he is not in office, because he has already constitutionally ceded his power to Osinbajo, and that should be the case until he returns. Well, anything that is done contrary is a fly in the face of Constitution and insult to Nigerians.
The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, must fish out the junior army officers alleged to be hobnobbing with politicians for undisclosed political reasons. This is the demand of some section of the civil society and other pressure groups in the country. Did Buratai subtly moot the possibility of a coup plot? Is Buratai trying to play the role of a whistleblower rather than getting to the root of this weighty allegation? The Chief of Army Staff, who should deal with the threat, has pressed the panic button. Should we be worried?
This is another thing that is happening in the polity. The last time we had intimations of this was the time Yaradua was sick, and people were saying we were getting into a situation of constitutional crisis. And some people were insinuating that the military was planning a return. That did not happen. In this case, the Chief of Army Staff came out boldly to say that some soldiers were meeting with some politicians. For what? And a Chief of Army Staff should not just say it. He should flush them out. We need to know the politicians. We need to know the soldiers. We need to know their motives, because this is a democracy. The civil society is not supposed to yield to that. The time of military adventurism has passed. It is now an anachronism, and that should be the case. The Buratai should not just say it. It should be compelled by the National Assembly to name names, and anybody who is responsible or who is associated with this ominous activity should face the law.
The book Antidotes for Corruption, The Nigerian Story, is written by Dino Melaye. The foreword was written by Senate President Bukola Saraki. The special guest of honor at the book launch is Dame Patience Jonathan. If you gauge public reaction to the book launch, it was clear that the caliber of guests who graced the book launch overwhelmed the title of the book. They say you cannot judge a book by its cover, but this Dino Melaye's book is clearly not an antidote for corruption. There was a conspicuous absence of officers of the anti-graft agency, and the Senate President used the event to take a swipe at the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Saraki said the EFCC prefers the show rather than the substance. Saraki is currently facing trial at the Code of Conduct Tribunal for non-declaration of assets. Patience Jonathan is currently engaged in a legal battle with the EFCC over the sum of $5.8 million linked to her. Dino Melaye has failed to prove beyond reasonable doubts that he is an authentic graduate of the Ahmadu Bello University Zaria. He also cannot account for the source of his wealth.
We know we have before us a number of bills that we believe also strengthen the fight. One, the whistleblower protection bill, which will also be driving today. In the confusion of so many whistles, at the end of the day, nothing was achieved. We hope that when this is backed by legislation, we will have a greater value, and it is our hope that we can pass it before July of this year.
When those who celebrate the successes of the fight against corruption in terms of high-profile arrest, high-profile investigation, high-profile prosecution, and even detention, they are missing the point, because that is dealing with the symptoms of corruption. If we must make progress, our focus should be to replace the old order that was corrupt with a new order that makes corruption near impossible to take place.
Very high positive resultant effects from the public. My motion on TSA got over 7 billion recovered to government treasury. And I've also brought bills, and I can tell you that 90% of my bills and motions all border on issues of corruption, because corruption is the bane of our development. And once we get corruption right, then development will definitely naturally.
I'm sure some of you are smiling. Saraki talking about corruption. And then what was he talking about? He was saying that we should focus on systemic corruption. In other words, we should focus more on the people who steal 20,000, who get 20,000 in order to give you your passport, and those who steal billions, we should leave them alone, because we should not be, because if we put people like Saraki on the dock and we concentrate on people like that, it is show. But if the guy who stole some 20,000 naira and for armed robbery and was executed recently, if we deal with those people, that is the real fight on corruption. When the head is rotting, what happens to the rest of the body? And Dogara was saying the same thing. He was the one who was trying to make the difference between what is in budget and what is not in the budget the other time. Was he not saying, Dogara saying that high profile corruption is a symptom? If the head is rotting, the rest of the people will follow. It shows that we don't have leaders. We just have a bunch of irresponsible goons who are put in charge of things.
There is so much talk about the performance of Governor Akinwumi Ambode in Lagos State. The latest excitement is the commissioning of the Jubilee Bridge in Abule Egba, a neighborhood notorious for traffic gridlock.
To the glory of God and the benefit of mankind.
Another overhead bridge was commissioned at Aja with the aim of improving connectivity in the area. Lagos has remained the pace setter in infrastructure development and improving the standard of living for all residents in the state. Governor Akinwumi Ambode appears to be one of the few governors in Nigeria steering the ship far away from troubled waters. In Lagos today, people are talking about the consistency in the implementation of a developmental roadmap that was set more than 16 years ago.
It's a transformation from 0 to 100.
The Lagos state government they are really trying. They are really trying. I appreciate them.
The go-slow stopped. No more go-slow here. Before now, accessing this area was like a tug of war. The roundabout at every point really slowed down traffic. But when the man came, because he's a thinking governor, he now took away all the most of the roundabouts are off by now, and then he replaced them with traffic lights. Now we don't have that much traffic anymore.
Well, at least something to calm us down. After 3 instances of reach, we have a sense of responsibility and connection to the people. Who will not see that Abule Egba bridge and not say, oh, something good is going on, or the Aja one. If you have been in Lagos before that bridge, and you have driven past that place during the time of traffic gridlock, you will always pray to get to the other side. Now, you are praying to even drive, to enjoy it. That is what thinking does. This was not just about having money. It's about using money with wisdom, what I call putting a light touch to things. That is what Governor Ambode has been doing. I mean, before that, we also saw what he did at a day earlier at Berger, where he turned that place, which was also a traffic nightmare, into ease of movement. That is what we are talking about. Not those people can do budget, those people can define corruption, and those people are plotting coup because somehow they feel disaffected from democracy. So that's why I call him Alpha Governor. He's showing the way. And Lagos has continued to be the oasis in a country where things are seen to go wrong. What one musician called Nigeria jaga jaga, everything scatter scatter. Well, what Ambode is doing is to bring order, beauty, and symmetry to things. On the big talk today, a senior advocate of Nigeria and the chairman Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, Professor Itse Sagay.
It is better to recover the loot, even if you cannot get a conviction, than to allow the defendant to go not only scot-free from imprisonment or any other sanction, but to go with state resources, with the money. Because these people who have accumulated our monies are very attached to the money. In fact, take away that money, they feel that life is useless.
Now, in everything happening in the polity, there is certainly room for comic relief. The first sketch is an unsigned 2017 budget. This is a cartoon from the Daily Trust by Modestus. So we see 2017 budget with his hand reaching out to 2016 budget. And then he say, hey, be strong, dude. I followed the same route. Welcome to the club. You see what you can see here that is making mockery of the budget. 2016 budget took such a long time. And in fact, we are still under 2016 budget in May 2017 because we have not even signed the budget yet. So this is a spoof of what is going on with our budget matters. And then the second one from Asukwa of Business Day is becoming Nigeria's prime cartoonist. There are gods and heroes. And we see here that how the four musketeers, former leaders of the country, including Jonathan and Obasanjo, and so on. And then we have on the one side Party 2, Religion 2, and there you see somebody holding a whip, another person holding fire, and on both sides, they are coming at each other, and the leaders are ensconced in the middle in comfort. This is a spoof of a country divided by tribe and party, and the privileged elite are still having their good time. Next on the show is In the Mirror. Most Nigerians now acknowledge that like almost other areas of the country's socio-economic life, traffic management has steadily become famous for multiplicity and duplicity of functions. Every day, several road agencies have personnel on the roads extorting motorists in the guise of checking vehicle papers. Officers of the Nigeria Police Vehicle Inspection Office, famously called the VIO, that Ambode has now well and fruitfully stopped from operating on the roads, the Federal Road Safety Corps, and the Lagos State Traffic Management Authority are on our roads performing overlapping traffic-related functions. The question is, whose responsibility is it to enforce road traffic regulations? Even the state governor during the week also made the point that, you know, the FRSC should not be operating on inner roads of Lagos where you see them operate. Like many large cities, Lagos is plagued by a traffic system whose modernization hasn't kept pace with growth of its population. This is manifested in congestions caused by the dizzying number of vehicles on the roads at the same time. Despite the state government's best efforts, public transportation is still inadequate, and that is why efforts have been made from time to time to show that we want to change the cars, the vehicles on the roads in Lagos, that they want to bring in new buses to take even the yellow buses out of the road. And add to this the need for more public spaces for parking, which the government is now addressing. If you look at the Keja interchange, the Oshodi interchange that are coming up, things like that that are being developed across the state. And the cost and the high cost of maintaining overused roads. The stress buttons are further pressed when a traffic officer jumps in front of your vehicle and yells, "Park!" Some of them are lucky that they don't meet angry people that just run them over. He or she goes on to check your vehicles, and if all seems well, proceeds to examine virtually every item in the car, including from your brake system to the fire extinguisher. Picture this taking place on a two-carriage road used by tricycles, motorcycles, trucks, cars, and of course, the almighty pedestrian. This has caused the VIOs and the road safety. They have used this to cause a lot of traffic problems and accidents and sometimes colossal injuries to people. The question sometimes is, are these traffic officers enforcing road laws or making worse the traffic problems? Stories abound of the high-handedness and overzealousness of traffic management officers. And one particular culprit, as we have said, are the VIOs, who are now, thankfully, out of our ears. They are arguably the most dreaded of the traffic management agencies on Lagos roads. But apart from the grief they have constantly caused motorists, a recent misadventure that led to the burning of a seized car may have led to their ban from Lagos roads permanently. In developed countries like the United States, traffic management and handling of violations vary from state to state. In some, police officers are allowed to arrest people for offenses punishable by a fine, while others prohibited. But no matter the state, a road user pulled over by an officer knows that it is due to traffic ticket fines and penalties that go along with a citation. But in those countries, they are not always just. There's racism. In the US, there's what they call driving while black. Because you are black, they pull you over. So we have, well, just as we have our own peculiarities here, they also have it there. I remember when I got my first car in the US and I just drove it out of the dealership. I was pulled over. The person wanted to know if I owned the car, just because I was black. I'm still black. Lagos is indeed trying to invest in traffic management by constructing more roads, bridges, laybys, and erecting traffic signals across the state to attain a gridlock-free city. Traffic management officers must be trained on the use of modern technology to detect offenders. And that's what Ambode is trying to do now to make things easier for traffic offense to be tracked and punished without causing problem for all others, and to be humane in dealing with the public. Now for a bit of odd news. When we hear of celebrity or royal living a double life, there is tendency to think in negative terms, think that they're always living in all those posh lives, doing nothing, just waiting for people to wait on them. Well, think of the King of the Netherlands, Willem-Alexander, who is proving us wrong. He has been ferrying passengers around for 21 years, but they are never told there is a royal in the cockpit. Just think of an Oba or a prince who is well known, who is flying Arik or any of the airlines. Just imagine that. The 50-year-old has revealed he has been living a secret double life as a co-pilot for commercial airlines. He takes to the skies twice a month to ferry passengers around on short-haul services for a Dutch airline. Although travelers may have recognized the monarch's voice, as he updated them on weather conditions and their time of arrival, his presence was never revealed. King Willem-Alexander may start conversion training to fly Boeing 737 passenger jets. Why? The fleet of smaller Fokker 70 planes flown by the king are now being phased out. He, however, has no plans to co-pilot on flights which involve an overnight stop, because it could mean he cannot get back in time for the Netherlands in case of an emergency. Maybe that's another decoy. We cannot say. Maybe he wants to do that. So that you don't know that he's in those flights. So why did he choose to stay incognito? King William Alexander says, and I quote, "The advantage is that I can always say I am speaking on behalf of the captain and crew to welcome them on board, so I don't have to say my name." But then, most people don't listen anyway, he said, end of quote. Well, that's an interesting part. I'm looking forward to an emir or a Kabiyesi or an Oba or an Ogbuefi or any of those prominent people, or even the prominent politician flying from one place to the other and then doing that for free, because of course it doesn't need the money, doing that for free. And then we know that that is an example of service to the people without asking to be thanked. The big talk is next. I have with me a special guest, Professor Itse Sagay. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Let us start with your recent tiff with the Senate. During the book launch of Dino Melaye's work on corruption, the Senate President was lashing out at your committee and also was lashing out at the federal government for what he called systemic corruption. And it seemed he wanted to give the political elite a pass.
Yes, I think those comments look to me a little bit bizarre, given the sources from which they were coming. Those constitute some of the major stumbling blocks on the struggle against corruption. We all know the facts that there are no friends of the government anti-corruption crusade. So it's just like a rat trying to advise the owner of cheese about how to preserve the cheese against its being consumed. And obviously that cheese would not survive. And that advice would be totally inappropriate and unacceptable to the owner of the cheese. So it was odd. The whole ceremony was odd. The people who attended were odd. They have people who are known to be very hostile to any attempt to clean up this country from corruption were there, and they were advising a government that is committed like this one to wiping out corruption, but how you should go about it. Most bizarre.
Yeah, in the event, there were three outstanding personalities, maybe four, but let's put Dino Melaye aside. Some people regard him as a clown, but you have the Senate President.
Yes.
You had the former First Lady, and then you had the Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
All of them have been fingered for inappropriateness regarding corruption. And they were standing on the stage. Is that a reflection? Is that a reflection of how bad this society has become? That people who are supposed to be role models have become champions of corruption and doing it in a very barefaced manner? Yes.
You see, what happened that day was a case of these people mocking the whole country, not the government. They were thumping their noses at Nigeria to say any effort you make at wiping corruption will crash because we are here. And you can do your worst. What can you do? That is really what the whole thing came down to. How can Dino Melaye present a book called Antidote Against Corruption? If he presents that sort of book antidote against corruption. That's a really bizarre and odd type of exercise that will leave the whole world baffled. Because if he's against corruption, then there'll be no corruption.
Now, the other issue that has generated tiff between you and the Senate has got to do with they can demand the face of anti-corruption battle, which is Ibrahim Magu, who heads the EFCC. And there have been a number of issues. One of them is that they don't want, the Senate doesn't want him as head of EFCC. And you have taken a position against the Senate. But some people have said, why Magu, why not anybody else?
If anybody tells you that, yes, that person is one of those who wants to sabotage the anti-corruption struggle. This is not a country where you say why somebody and why not. Okay, why Buhari? Why not anybody else? We can go on with that. When you have the best, most committed, most effective, most dedicated, most fearless, most courageous, when you have people with that quality, then somebody else tells you, no, don't worry, it was rejected, go and look for somebody else. That person is trying to promote a setback for the anti-corruption struggle. So that's how we identify them. When we begin to talk like that, anyone who says, why Magu, know that he has an ulterior motive. Know that he's an agent of corruption.
Yeah. Now, this brings us to, even regarding Magu, there's certain conflict in the presidency itself between two reports. You know, one from the DSS, which says that it does not want, it believes that Magu is a tainted personality. And we were saying that, well, an earlier report had already cleared him. Why this conflict within the presidency as to how to push one candidate?
Well, my own committee is not deep in the presidency. Yes. We are sort of at the periphery. We have our mandate, and we are carrying, occasionally we report what we are doing, occasionally we advise. But the internal politics of the presidency is alien to us. We don't know what is going on. But it is obvious that there was a faction within the presidency that did not want Magu. For what reason? I don't know, but certainly not for reasons of corruption, not for reasons of incompetence, or reasons of lack of courage and commitment, for purely personal reasons, which have nothing to do with Magu's performance. But I really don't know the reasons, and I cannot publicly state the names of the offices of those involved, although one has an idea.
Mm. Yeah, people have an idea that some people say, well, the office of the NSA and that of the DSS are in conflict and within a presidency. And some people are saying, well, the president is supposed to be in charge. He's the commander-in-chief. Yeah. That the buck stops at his table. And if he is not able to take a decision and also corral his men into line, it's a weakness. It's an act of weakness in the presidency. And he himself, by that weakness, is also standing in the way of implementation of the corruption battle.
Well, my response, the way I look at that, yes, is that nobody is perfect. And you look generally at what the president has been able to achieve in the anti-corruption struggle. Our committee was the first ever body set up when he became president on 10th August 2015. So when you look at all that, well, when there are some other areas where he's not really conducted himself in a way that would have expected or done what would have expected, one should tend to overlook it because the pluses are far, far larger than the negatives.
Okay, there's also this battle you had with the Senate, the earlier one, yes, where you described them as childish and irresponsible.
Absolutely.
That was because the Senate decided, because the presidency insisted on Magu that we are going to suspend for 2 weeks any hearings concerning the 27 recs placed before them.
Yes.
Yeah, what does that tell of the Senate?
That's childish tantrum. That's childish tantrum. Because you are not happy with one thing, you bring down the whole government. No, there will be no government activity again because you were deprived of sweets. Therefore, the child has to break all the furniture in the house. That doesn't make sense. But that's why I made that statement, and I stick to it.
And you said that they had no right to summon you. Some people said you were above the law, you were acting above the law, because they are the top law-making body, and if they want you to summon you to come, you should obey.
No, they may be law-making bodies, but they are not law courts. That is the distinction. They were trying to conduct themselves as if they were law courts. If they have any grievance against me, they know where to go. They can go and file a case. Defamation, whatever.
That's what he said.
That's all they can do. But to summon me and want to conduct some form of judicial or semi-judicial activity, totally illegal and unconstitutional. That's why I did not go. It's not because if I had gone, in fact, they would not have been happy with what I would have said, because I know a lot about a lot of them there. Who would be unhappy to see me because of what I know about them.
Now there have been, on this Magu's case, people have said, well, what right has the Senate when about half of them are under one form of corruption investigation or the other? So the problem, but the Senate still has to perform its duty and hold its stand. So the problem is not with the Senate, it's with our electoral system, with a democracy that made those people get there in the first place.
Yes, it's an absurdity. It's a dilemma we have, because those who have cases to answer for corruption are in fact put in a position of attempting or appearing to challenge corruption. It's an absurdity. Nigeria is in a very absurd situation right now.
In the case of Magu, recently there were certain setbacks in cases where, for instance, of Demola, that of Patience Jonathan and a few others. And people said, well, it looks like we are not getting justice, although we are getting judgment. And does it mean that some people have said, oh, the EFCC cannot get good lawyers to run the system? Is it a problem of our justice system, or is it a problem of the EFCC?
It's a mixture of all of it. For example, in the case of Patience Jonathan, the failure to serve her and to file a counter affidavit contributed to the ruling that the court gave. In the case of Ademola, I'm baffled up till today about that judgment. I won't comment on it because it's an appeal, and we'll see what the Court of Appeal will do. But I'm extremely baffled by that. So it's a combination of everything. And I think when engaged in this type of struggle, I call it a struggle, you must be ready for setbacks, because there are very many powerful forces who have an interest in preserving the status quo, who have made all their wealth and got all their authority from abusing the people of this country. And so some of them as wealthy as individual states, not as wealthy as the federal government, but as wealthy as individual states. So to fight such people who can recruit lawyers, whose main speciality now is how to stall cases, frustrate cases, prevent cases from coming to a conclusion, for a share of the loot. When you have that sort of thing, we have a very tough situation, and we all just have to be patient. We're definitely going to have setbacks, but I'm sure victories will also come.
how does the victory come, sir, when we are in a situation where we have very clever lawyers who can use technicalities and get where they want to, which is injustice? And some people have said, even lawyers on the progressive end have said, well, you still have to follow the law, even when we know, even when the society knows that something unjust has been done. That, you know, everybody knows this man stole, this man did this evil, but somehow within the law, some shenanigan has been able to be pulled off that the man walks on the streets.
Yeah. It won't always be like that. There will be some cases that no judge will be able to declare someone discharged and acquitted. There will be some strong cases like that. Not only that, in anticipation of the situation we are facing now, the whole criminal justice system has a strategy, which is recovery of the asset regardless of conviction. We call it non-conviction based asset recovery. We have started on that. You will see that Patience Jonathan's 5.9 million has been frozen again. And she's going to be invited to come and tell Nigeria what work she did to earn that money. And if she cannot, then it will be permanently forfeited to Nigeria. So at times, if you cannot convict, at least you can recover the loot.
Some people have said that is not a battle of corruption. When I spoke with Ozekome the other day on this show, I think he was making the point that it is not really a war against corruption. It's a loot recovery activity we're involved in, collect the money and so on. It doesn't stop people from stealing, and then we become a nation of loot recoverers rather than a nation that fights corruption and maintains values.
Well, I think that sounds very ill coming from his mouth, because he's now the leading soldier for all those who are accused of corruption. He is the one who is jumping from state to state, court to court, to defend them with the last blood in his body. So it sounds very ill in his mouth for him to say that. And I say, it is better to recover the loot, even if you cannot get a conviction, than to allow the defendant to go not only scot-free from imprisonment or any other sanction, but to go with state resources, with the money. Because these people who have accumulated our monies are very attached to the money. In fact, take away that money, they feel that life is useless. By the time they can no longer have private jets, cannot build huge blocks of buildings, cannot send their children to the most expensive schools in the world, they would have been brought back to the level of just an ordinary Nigerian elite. That is the last thing they want in this world. So nobody is going to discourage us from recovering assets, even when we cannot achieve a conviction.
But their inability to achieve conviction, some of them have said, is because of lack of resources with the EFCC. The EFCC does not even have the resources. And if we really want to fight them, we have to match them resource for resource. And Obasanjo said, they should get Ogbologbo lawyers.
Yes, a lot of thought is going into this issue. There's training of these young lawyers in all ministries of justice all over the country. 160 have been trained at the federal level, and almost that number has been trained at the state level. In fact, I just came back from training of state lawyers in the South-South zone in Benin recently. So that is going on. In other words, we are building up their capacity. And a stage will come when you will see these young lawyers led by older ones, because we're also getting older ones, even some retired civil criminal prosecutors have been engaged as resource persons and also as prosecutors to lead these younger ones who are being trained. And I think with time, their expertise will improve, their capacity will be built up, and they'll be able to confront these expensive senior advocates whose lives' ambition now is simply to frustrate Nigeria in our anti-corruption struggle.
Now, in this battle against corruption, some people say, even if you have some of the best lawyers, that the law itself is rigged against the poor. It's rigged in favor of these senior advocates and their co-travelers in government or in office who steal. And they always find a way through the law. And some people say, look at the Saraki case. In spite of the adjustment to how the provision that makes it quick to deal with issues, there is still rigmarole going in this case, and that once you have these clever lawyers, they have a way of turning it.
Yeah, it's not. Previously, they had a way, but the laws in the 2015 Administration of Criminal Justice Act has introduced a lot of changes, and really, there's no excuse now for delayed cases. If you look at all these cases being delayed, you can finger just one aspect of Nigerian institutions, the judiciary. That one I lay at their door completely. There are judges who are pretending that they are not aware of that law. Why, for example, in this case, the Saraki case, should the judge have allowed somebody to be cross-examined for over 20 days? It's totally, what word do I want to use?
Unacceptable.
Yes, unacceptable, without precedent, unprecedented. It's never happened. Judges have to take control of their courts and not allow senior advocates to control them. The judge is the presiding officer. He is the boss. We lawyers, we make pleas, we make applications, we argue, and do all sorts of things, but the judge decides. And it's not democratic. Nobody is going to vote. That man is God's representative there and is the highest there. That's why you see him sitting up there. But some judges have abandoned that authority and given it to senior advocates who now run their courts for them. So that's part of the problem. And honestly, I feel that any judge who adjourns a case for more than 14 days, quite a number of them are doing it, should be brought before the NJC to be properly disciplined. Some are doing it with impunity, and it's a very serious subversion of the new criminal Administration of Criminal Justice Act.
But the NJC is aware of all of this. Why has it not done anything?
Well, the NJC...
Like the Saraki case.
Yes, usually they receive reports before they act. But nothing stops the Chief Justice of Nigeria from calling his brethren together and saying, this is intolerable. That's true. But NJC normally will not go out as an institution and take a step unless you report the matter to them. And so this particular case, which is dragged on for over a year, over a very simple, straightforward set of charges, is disturbing. But the judge simply has to take control of it.
What we need now, not just that we want the judges or the lawyers to argue and try to force their way, but to be able to use the same technicality of law to bring off justice. Yeah. Are we getting enough of that?
No, not at all. You've just put your finger on the most important lapse in the whole present adjudicatory system. You just put your finger on it. Our lawyers, our judges are no longer inclined towards doing justice. They are more inclined towards applying law, or what they regard as law, which mainly is technicalities. There was a time when we had a Supreme Court, from about 1978 to 1993, when we had a Supreme Court, who were dedicated to justice. You can bring any case. You can compile the law from here to high heavens. But the first thing they did is, where is the justice of this case? Then once they determine the justice, they will now build a new foundation which will overcome all that you have erected. And to such an extent that it became possible to predict where judgment was going to go in any case. All you needed to ask yourself is, which is just, which is unjust.
Yes.
If it's the just is what they're going to decide. Yes. If the party that was just against whom there was an injustice, who was going to win. And it was predictable. And in my view, if a court sentence, a court's decision is not predictable, that court is not doing justice. Because there can be only one justice in a single case. That's what that Supreme Court took to the highest level. People like Esho, Oputa, Anyagolu, Namani, Karibi White, those people just erected justice as the ultimate end of law. So if you brought a case which is legally perfect, but unjust, you are going to end up on the floor.
Well, some people have said maybe it's not a problem of the judges and that you cannot take the judiciary in isolation. When the society is rotting, the society throws up its own individuals, throws up its own bad journalists, throws up its own bad judges, its own bad lawyers, and so on. And that, why are we blaming the society? Why are we blaming the judges? Why don't you blame the society? Take care of the value system of the society, and those values eventually will give us great judges. And that we had all those judges in the past because the society was a little saner at that time. But progressively we have gotten worse and we get the kind of judges we deserve.
I always call that view blasphemy. Pure blasphemy. You know, only people who don't know what they are talking are saying so. A judge is set up above every other citizen.
To retrieve
the judge is the one who decides who is wrong between one government and the other government, between federal and state, between state and state, between federal, state, and the individual. They are the ultimate adjudicators, and what they say is binding. So they are a special breed. They are the only ones who can condemn anybody to death. So, as I said, they are a special breed. You cannot rank them with any other arm of government or any other level of society. If you do that, that society is destroyed. It is wrecked. It's a chaotic society that has no morality, no standards, no ethics. The judiciary stands out single as the only institution in the country that must not follow various or degenerate into the level of society. They must be above society. Otherwise, they are not judiciary.
That brings me to the issue of the rule of law. Some people have said, well, it's good to fight corruption, but that even the EFCC sometimes has not followed the rule of law. And how do you fight corruption without following the rule of law? And that itself is an act of corruption.
I don't agree that the EFCC has not followed the rule of law. In fact, it is adherence to the rule of law that has been a clog in the speed and effectiveness of the EFCC.
For instance, Dasuki.
Sambo Dasuki, that's a DSS case. It's not an EFCC case. It's not an ICPC case. Those people follow the law. But when you go into the security aspect, well, there are certain things we outsiders don't know that's going on, which they may regard as so important to the survival of the country that they may appear to be disobeying court orders. So I don't really want to go into that. But if you talk of EFCC, if you talk of ICPC, if you talk of Code of Conduct Bureau, you will not see a situation in which they ignore the rule of law.
Finally, I want you to clarify to the public, because some of them think that you are a staff of the government. By that, and some say, oh, Professor Shagay is now an establishment man and stuff like that. And to distinguish what the Presidential Advisory Committee is doing, how it is funded. I understand that it's funded externally outside of government and so on, so you have your independence.
Well, I think the committee has been established to fight corruption in so many ways, to coordinate the anti-corruption struggle. We provide training for both prosecutors and judges in how to interpret on the interpretation of various laws like the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. And when I say we provide, it's not we who do it. Fellow judges do it. Judges who are experienced in certain areas are the ones who hold those workshops. In some cases, we bring people from abroad. As I said, we actually train prosecutors, particularly on how to draft charges. And we hold workshops and consultations with a very broad spectrum of society. All the anti-corruption agencies, we held workshops for them, the various ministries, and the police, the civil society, the professional organizations, to discuss with them about how we can stem this rise of corruption, how we can get their cooperation, how they within their own organizations are actually working to reduce corruption. We're doing all that. And also, we're looking at some of the cases against corruption which have been suspended because of lack of will or lack of resources, and to see how those can be resuscitated. And generally, our aim at the end of the day is to try and achieve a society that is not corruption-free, because that's not possible, but a society where corruption has been so reduced that it will not be a threat to the development of the country and to the future of our people.
Thank you very much, Professor Itse Sagay. We've had Professor Itse Sagay as our special guest for this show today. And thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the show today. Join me next week for another edition of the program. And until then, be good.